Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107.
It is amazing to me how our community is repeatedly corralled into engaging in the most remedial parts of political discourse. And this situation with Joe Biden is no different. So I wanted to come and give a different sort of discourse surrounding Joe Biden's interview on The Breakfast Club. I find that Black media has heavily fixated on the last thing that he said regarding revoking somebody's imaginary Black card, and has almost completely ignored the full content of the interview, which is far more insidious and insulting to the Black community than that faux pas he made at the end. We always go for the soundbite. We always go for the emotionality. We rarely go for the facts. That is why it is believed that Blacks can be manipulated so easily in their vote. We have to show through our assessment of political conversation and our outrage that we are intellectualizing everything that comes out of candidates' mouths, and that this idea that they can appeal to talking points and emotional response in Black people will not be sufficient to gain, maintain, or encourage a Black vote, nor will it stop socio-political revolution. So, with that said, let's not waste any time. Let's get into the meat and bones and the relevant parts of this interview that our community should be focusing on.
Vice President Biden, how are you today?
Good. Good to see you.
Same here. You know, I've been critical of you. I have a few things I want to talk to you about today.
I know you have.
Yeah.
You don't know me.
No, I don't. That's why I want to get to know you today. I want to talk to you about mostly Black stuff. But, first of all, how are you? How's your family during this quarantine?
Thank God everybody's doing well. How about you and your family?
Man, we over here blessed, Black, and highly favored, man.
Well, I tell you what, the Black community is getting killed, though.
That is very, very true. That is very true.
The interview opens up, and clearly this interview is heavily contrived. But the interview opens up with a witty banter where Joe Biden tries to sound relatable and down with the peeps, so to speak, and Charlemagne tries to act like he has anything to do with a voice for the Black community. Then Joe Biden makes a statement that we all can head nod to, and he does this a lot during the interview. He makes random statements that we can all agree on, because the goal is the more you can agree with the things that come out of his mouth, the less his actual political stances and history matter. All you remember are the things he said you agree with. So he says, man, Black people are getting killed, which is just an awkward statement to make out of nowhere. And Charlemagne goes, yeah, they are. Then the question comes up about Joe Biden's cognitive functioning.
It's a lot of right-wing media outlets. They question you. They question your cognitive health. They don't think everything's working upstairs. What do you say to that?
I say I can hardly wait to meet with that guy who is the stable genius.
There's nothing stable about that guy.
Joe Biden sidesteps this very serious question, and I might try to find a few clips.
Case we cannot let this. We've never allowed any crisis from the Civil War straight through to the pandemic of 17, all the way around 16. We have never let our democracy take second fiddle. We can both have a democracy and elections, and at the same time correct the public health.
Lobbyists aren't bad people. Special interest groups are not bad people. But guess what? They're corrosive. People who accept the money from them aren't bad people, but it's human nature. You go out, Lynn, and bundle $250,000 for me, all legal, and then you call me after I'm elected and say, Joe, I'd like to come and talk to you about something. You didn't buy me, but it's human nature. You helped me. I'm going to say, sure, Lynn, come on in.
Why attack Sanders?
Why? You're getting nervous, man. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You said you were. Make sure make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
I would agree that your service in the Senate up to this point has not reflected any particular concern for the larger contributors.
Well, the fortunate thing is I didn't have many larger contributors, and the only reason, see, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talked about it, but what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
I'm beginning to see why your wife left you. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, you walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, you may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. I mean, that's a story.
He sidesteps this very serious question regarding his cognitive functioning. If you've watched Joe Biden for long enough, you know that he's slightly off kilter. And I don't know if this is a deep fake or if they've just given this man a lot of drugs to keep him present. But he was more collected in this interview than we normally see him, especially in candid environments, in-person environments that are not filmed in a studio-like area, such as when he's on the campaign trail, standing on a podium. In fact, this COVID situation and these lockdowns are literally maybe the best things that have happened to him. But of course, if you just bash Trump, we're supposed to forget the fact that there is something wrong with his mind. And either he's senile or just crazy, or more likely, just a weirdo.
You know, one thing I've been critical about is I feel like you've been like MIA during this global pandemic. You know, it's people like Governor Cuomo here in New York who have become political stars simply because we see and hear from them every day. So I'm just like, I'm wondering how you're going to energize people and win a campaign from the House.
So then he starts to bring up a talking point that they're using to manipulate Black people, which is this energizing the Black people to get them to vote for him. If you remember the piece I did on the Washington Post on my video, Are Black Women Stupid? That was one of the things that was a talking point in that pro-Joe Biden video.
Vice President Biden, you need us.
Candidates like Amy Klobuchar will not energize us.
Joe Biden, candidates like Amy Klobuchar won't energize us. You'll see that Charlemagne uses that same catchphrase, energizing us.
I'm just like, I'm wondering how you're going to energize people. Okay.
And let me tell you something, my community's figured it out a while ago. But here's the deal. What I have to do is I have to continue to talk about the things that matter. And the things that matter are, for example, right now there's a study out of Columbia University and the Disease Control Center up there. They pointed out that if he had listened to me and others and acted just 1 week earlier to deal with this virus, there'd be 36,000 fewer people dead.
I wonder what community is his community. It's certainly not the community that you or I are in, and it's definitely not the community that he thinks Charlemagne is in, because he didn't say our community. He said my community. So we start with witty banter, an appeal to the fact that Black people are dying out of nowhere, bashing Trump, dragging Hillary Clinton, and now he's fear-mongering? Really, Joe? Dead? Yeah, we're gonna vote for you because we're scared of COVID.
And you guys are wondering what's he doing? Come on, man. Get a life. Get a life. This guy has been incredibly terrible. And what we've had is, back in January,
I wrote an article back, I think, the 27th of January, said this pandemic's here. We should act. Every other country that was acted around the time, got the notice around the time we did, they have considerably fewer deaths as a percent of the population. I'm the guy that said we ought to take hard records and find out exactly how many people in the Black community are getting COVID and are dying from it. And look what's happened. Now everybody's going, oh, surprise, surprise. Look, everybody knows this. We have to come back. We have to fight back. And, you know, the crisis is laying bare the institutional racism that's still prevalent in our society.
Now, I want you to remember that he spoke of institutional racism, because that's going to become really relevant in a couple of minutes.
And I believe we have to address it by transforming our economy, and this time bringing everybody along. And we haven't, look, he started to undermine the pillars of his economy before. Look, the blinders, Charlemagne, in my view, have been taken off. Okay. Now people recognize that those essential workers, a disproportionate amount of them are African Americans, and they're breaking their necks, risking their lives, losing their lives. They're grocery store workers, they're bus drivers, they're delivery people, they're the people who are on the line, they're the healthcare workers who are in a position where they're taking care of the nurses. I mean, and they're making basically the minimum wage. So this time when we come back, we had not only move this along, we not only rebuild, but we have to transform this economy. We can create millions of new jobs in transportation, energy structure. There's jobs, a job is a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity, it's about respect, it's about how you're treated.
And then the 40 acres and a mule commentary comes on. This is always fascinating to me. You see, Black people, we work the most remedial jobs. We're earning minimum wage, as Biden said. And a job is about dignity. It's about respect. You know, Black people are always trying to get dignity and respect. And I have an offer for you. Do you want 40 acres and a mule?
Something like that in Ohio. You know what we're going to do? What? We're going to give every last one of you 40 acres and a mule. And a mule? 40 acres and a mule. Gee, because we're your friends. And you're going to become voters. And you're going to vote like your friends do.
Vote for me. I'll be the one to give it to you. Why is every single candidate since slavery who's wanted the Black vote offered Black people 40 acres and a mule? I've yet to get my 40 acres or my mule, so I don't know why they keep pulling this stunt. It was 40 acres and a mule for our ancestors. It's dignity, respect, and jobs fit for Black people from Joe Biden. Oh, but the white savior complex and the archaic way of thinking of his relationship as a white man to Black people, it doesn't stop there. It gets much, much worse.
Democrats take Black voters for granted, votes are quid pro quo, right? It's not like I don't want to vote. I just want to know what candidates will do for us in exchange for our votes. The same way young progressive Latinos or the LGBT community.
Absolutely.
We want the same thing. Do you feel like Black people are owed that from the Democratic Party?
Absolutely, Bob. What did I say? Remember when they said Biden can't win the primaries?
Yes.
I kicked everybody's out. Excuse me.
No, talk like that. I need you to say that. You did what?
No, I won overwhelmingly. I told you when I got to South Carolina, I won every single county. I won a larger share of the Black vote than anybody has, including Barack. I increased the vote in Virginia overwhelmingly by 70%.
So what he's saying is, Black people, you created this beast.
Look, what people don't know about me is I come from a state that's the 8th largest Black population in America. The 8th largest. I get 96% of that vote for the last 40 years. They're the folks, as they say it my way, brung me to the dance. That's how I get elected every single time. And everybody's shocked. I get overwhelming support from the Black leadership, young and old. Every poll shows me way ahead. And it's not just, I hear this, oh yeah, old Blacks are with Biden, but youngs aren't. Look at the polling data.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a story.
Blacks are with Biden? Tell me that's not a real slogan.
Polling data, let's say it's off by half. Come on, man. Give me a little break here. This is where I come from. I got involved. I came home from college, and I had a job with a really fancy law firm out of law school. And my city is the only city in America occupied by the National Guard, the military, for 10 months when Dr. King was shot. And I had this fancy job, a kid coming from a lower middle income household. I quit and became a public defender. And I stayed in that community. I was the only guy when I was in high school. I had a job, a country club kind of job at a swimming pool. I was the only white employee in the East Side because I wanted to work in the projects, because I wanted to understand.
So was he a country club guy working at a swimming pool, or was he a white savior working in the projects because he wanted to understand us?
In an African village, everybody's turned out for the celebration. There's an Englishman on hand, too, the district officer, and he has an important message to deliver. But he'll wait until the festivities are over. Now it's time to deliver the speech, and the interpreter is summoned. He's probably going to talk about building that new road, although it might be any one of a dozen projects. And this might be any one of many British colonies in remote parts of the world. This district officer was the embodiment of imperial authority. That authority has sometimes been called paternalistic, and that's our topic in this program. In our last program, we saw how highly debatable the whole subject of colonialism has become. We'll be pursuing that debate through the next few programs, starting now with one aspect of it, paternalism, the business of the great white father telling the natives what to do for their own good.
Because clearly, where you go to understand black people is the projects. Everybody knows that. The projects are our culture. All you need to know about black people can be found in the hood. It's like our native environment.
That's how I got involved in politics. That's what this is all about for me. It's about equality. It's about dignity. It's about treating people with respect.
Oh, that's all we want. Equality, dignity, being treated with respect. If he says that, we'll definitely vote for him, because don't you want those things? I want those things. All black people want those things. It's all that matters to us. And the way that we get it is by voting for Biden.
And so, you know, when you take a look at my record, people talk about the crime bill. Crime bill didn't increase mass incarceration. Other things increased mass incarceration. And the reason why, if you go back and look, and I know you talk about it, you go back and take a look. That's why you had the vast majority of the black caucus at the time supporting the crime bill.
Let me just interject and say that the black caucuses, both at the state and federal level, are trash. Their members are trash. And they're really only there to be symbols. They don't actually do anything significant for the black community. It's actually a shame that we have so many black people in office, yet we can't push a black agenda to save our lives.
Almost every major city black mayor supported the crime bill because blacks were getting killed overwhelmingly as well. And what happened when that crime bill? It had 4 or 5 really important things. It had the Violence Against Women Act. It said drug courts, don't send anybody who has a drug problem to jail, send them to rehabilitation, to a drug court. It had in it, the assault weapons ban, getting rid of assault weapons, getting rid of the number of rounds you could have in a gun. It also had in it a whole range of other things, but had things I didn't like. Clinton wanted to put in a deal where, in fact, 3 strikes and you're out. I opposed that 3 strikes and you're out bill.
So he's saying that it had 4 or 5 different things that he liked. And then he proceeds to name 3, not 4 or 5. I want you to remember this, because these three things are his entire justification for saying that he signed off on this bill. And then we're going to get into whether this bill really did lock up a huge part of the black male community. But Biden claims that although he didn't like a lot of things in the bill, he said that number one, he liked that there was a clause in there that addressed battered women. Number two, drug courts. And number three, a ban on assault rifles. Essentially, you could only have so many rounds of bullets in a gun, which is just a sneaky way to backdoor disarmament of the public, but I won't go there.
I oppose the position taken that saying that you're going to have any mandatory sentences. But on balance, the whole bill, what happened was it did, in fact, bring down violent crime in black communities as well. And guess what? The fact is, prison population didn't increase. 94% of every prisoner in jail is in a state prison, not a federal prison.
So he's claiming that he opposed the three strikes bill, but because of those three things that he mentioned and a bunch of other stuff that apparently he can't remember, he voted yes on the bill. Funny, because we are currently watching a battle between the House and the Senate, because there's a bill that the Senate doesn't want to pass because it has a bunch of clauses in it that they like, but a whole bunch that they don't. Yet Biden couldn't understand that when there's a lot of things that are unjust in a bill, you don't vote yes simply because you like three things that are in it. Biden's trying to be sneaky. He's pointing out that most prisoners are in state and not federal prisons. And because he voted not on the states, because the multiple states do have three strikes laws, but he voted on the federal bill, he's not responsible for what went on in the states with their respective three strikes laws. The problem is that the states and the federal government worked in cahoots with each other in '94. And I know, for example, states like California passed their three strikes laws at the exact same time as the federal government, meaning that in '94 and '95, almost every state started creating these same bills. In fact, this is institutionalized racism, where the federal government and the state governments work together to disenfranchise a specific population. For him to pretend like he doesn't comprehend that this was a collective effort and, oh, my hands are clean because the states lock up most people, not the federal government, it's a nice try, but you were literally a part of an orchestrated, institutionally racist policy that was a collaboration between state and federal government. You don't get to wash your hands clean, and you don't get to insult our intelligence. And we're not even touching on Biden's 80s record yet. We're going to get there in a minute.
Look, I've been pushing, along with my colleagues in a black caucus in the United States Congress, we should change the entire, and I've been doing this for a while, change the entire prison system from one that is punishment to rehabilitation. There's only a couple things everybody has in common in jail. One is they were the victims of abuse, or their kids were, or their mother was. Number two, can't read. Number three, they don't have any job skills. They were in a position where they didn't get a chance. Why does it make sense? Why did I come along and write the first act that said when you get out of prison, you don't just get a notion where you get $25 in a bus ticket. You end up under the bridge. You end up under the bridge and just do the same place. So every single solitary person being released from prison should have access to every single government program. Why does it not make sense to have African Americans who are getting out of prison who serve their time?
Is he trying to pitch this prison policy as a black-centered policy? You know, because huge portions of the black community are criminals and in prison and need to be rehabilitated. Criminals in our community make up a small portion of our community, a tiny portion. Most black people are law-abiding citizens, not prisoners. Prison policy is just as relevant to whites, who make up the majority of the prison population, although blacks are imprisoned disproportionately per capita. But to pitch to black voters that you're going to focus on prisons because that is the end-all be-all to what black people need, when we get out of jail, we need this and that, is insulting. We're not criminals, Joe. We're not criminals.
Everybody, for that matter, be able to have public housing. Why doesn't it make sense that they can have Pell Grants to go to school? Why doesn't it make sense they can have access to health care? What are we, nuts? That's what we keep doing.
Yeah, sorry, that's our time there.
No, I'm sorry. I know Jill has to use this, but I've talked too much. I apologize.
No, I gotta ask you though, why so much resistance on admitting the crime bill and other legislation you are a part of was damaging to the black community? Because we had Hillary on a few years ago, and Ms. Clinton said that the crime bill, we made a lot of mistakes with that, and she wanted to atone for that by becoming the next president.
She was wrong. What happened was, it wasn't the crime bill. It was the drug legislation. It was the institution of mandatory minimums, which I oppose. Mandatory, I oppose them.
I thought you was a part of that in '84 as well. The Comprehensive Crime Control Act that established mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses. No. What happened was, what you're confusing is what happened was the Black Caucus came to me and said, look, I did this study when I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. We looked at every district of the of the 10 court districts in America, federal court districts, and we found out that if you got arrested for robbery and convicted, and I got arrested for robbery and convicted, it was the first time, you went to jail an average of 13 years. I went to jail an average of 3 years. So there was this whole move, same time for the same crime. So no one based on their color could go to jail longer than anybody else for the same crime. So what happened was there was a judicial selection committee setting up that how you deal with making sure that the sentencing process is taken out of the hands of prosecutors saying, I'm going to want 12 years, 13 years for you, and 3 years for me. The end result of that was the unintended consequence, which we changed, Barack and I did, was the fact that you, in fact, all of a sudden, you could not lower my sentence or your sentence be lower than what was the average sentence for everybody else going to jail in the district.
Joe Biden thinks he's slick. The Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, it did not make it so white people got equal time to black people. It made it so that there were mandatory minimum sentences. You know, the thing he claims he opposed? But he didn't oppose it. He voted for it. And it had nothing to do with race, and it didn't prevent white people from getting the mandatory minimum sentence and black people from getting a higher sentence. He's a whole liar out here. He thinks we can't read an act that was signed into law for ourselves. It's on the government's website, fool. Also, neither Charlemagne nor Joe Biden address Joe Biden's 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Control Act, which ensured that crack cocaine-related offenses would be prosecuted in excess of those of powdered cocaine. Oh, you're slippery, Joe, but you're not that slippery.
And the other thing we have to do, one of the things that, I was a public defender. I'm going to insist when I'm president that a federal public defender gets paid the same amount of money as a federal prosecutor gets paid. So you have representation. People have representation. But the bottom line is, the other piece is, I'm going to try to change, and I've laid it out. I'll send you a copy of my plan so you have it to see it.
Lift every voice?
Pardon me?
What, deliver every voice or what?
No, the plan I have is my manifesto for Black America. And particularly the portion of it that relates to how, in fact, we're going to deal with the prison system. If you are in prison, if you are convicted of a crime, no one should be going to jail for a drug crime.
If this man keeps going on about prisoners as if all black people care about is poverty, prisons, and he's about to ice the cake with drugs, because We're all ex-convict criminals in poverty on drugs.
Period. Nobody. No matter what the crime, particularly marijuana, which makes no sense for people to go to jail. They should be just wiped out completely. And the reason is that, if anything, for those crimes that are actually continue to be crimes, scheduled crimes, which marijuana shouldn't be anymore, what is happening is you shouldn't go to prison. You should go to a mandatory rehabilitation.
Rehab for pot? First of all, mandatory rehab is already happening for their people. They seem to get their minds right when their people got whacked out on meth or heroin or whatever their people are on right now. But what's interesting is that he thinks pot needs rehab. I mean, I'm not a pothead and I don't smoke pot, but who needs to be rehabilitated from marijuana? I don't see people robbing their grandma to get their next joint. He's going further and further off into left field as we speak.
I asked you about your running mate. I don't know if you saw, I saw today that a news report broke that Amy Klobuchar was being vetted, and a lot of people on social media, they're not too happy about that. And it's because they want your running mate to be a Black woman. I don't know if you saw the op-ed in the Washington Post by some of the leading Black women voices in this country. And they feel since Black women are such a loyal voting bloc and Black people saved your political life in the primaries this year, they have things they want from you. And one of them is a Black woman running mate. What do you say to them?
What I say to them is that I'm not acknowledging anybody who is being considered, but I guarantee you there are multiple Black women being considered.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. I mean, that's a story.
And then, of course, he throws in, I'm looking at a lot of Black women to be vice presidents. Because a Black female president covers a multitude of sins. Please, Joe.
Multiple.
You know,
Thanks so much. That's really our time. I apologize.
You can't do that to Black media.
And then his handler jumps in again because he's just screwing this interview up. They were supposed to stick to the script, and now they're getting off of it.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't Black.
And that's the comment everybody wants to focus on. But I think this is important. The liberal media has been trying to spin Joe Biden's political history and its impact on the Black community as something that was not as devastating as it truly was. His blatant misrepresentation of the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, and the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 removed millions of Black men out of the Black community on the heels of what was squashing of the Black revolutionary movement in this country and abroad. We cannot let him get away with twisting the facts, nor the media that supports him. He insulted the Black community so many times during this interview. He's trying to sell us the 40 acres and a mule narrative, speaking to us as if we are poor criminals on drugs and those are the things that matter to us when we vote. Whilst obviously our community has a care for those issues, our community is not made up of criminals and individuals on drugs and people who are not hardworking. It's the complete adverse. And because Joe Biden doesn't know that, he doesn't deserve the Black vote. Moreover, this conversation is silly. He's pandering for a popular vote, a vote in which your vote may not count. After all, the Electoral College doesn't have to vote for the people. It doesn't have to vote for the candidates you choose. And with that in consideration, why are we playing this game? We need to let candidates like Joe Biden realize Black people are beyond this political manipulation. Du Bois said it in the past. The concerns of whites were that Blacks could be swayed to vote, bribed, and pandered by emotionality and threats. and so they should not be allowed the vote. When I read Du Bois' words, I was offended. But I look at how they treat us, and it is clear that is the general consensus about how our votes are garnered now. This entire interview was insulting. Him saying someone's black card could be pulled because they didn't agree with a vote for him is the least of our concerns. We should be concerned that we are not respected in the political realm, and that they have managed to manipulate us to ignore an entire interview full of substantive arguments against Joe Biden and minimized our beef with him to a sound clip about a black card. I've never been more insulted, both by the conservative and liberal media and by black media, who took this hook, line, and sinker. I don't care what he said about someone's black card. I care about the things he said in the 15 minutes leading up to that. Because at the end of the day, his last comment was just a cumulative reflection of what he truly thinks of us. We are emotional and simple-minded and easily manipulated. Fuck Joe Biden.
You know, the babies, the future, the black babies, that's what it's all about. You know, they talk about Black Lives Matter. I'm gonna tell you like this, man. The black youth is what matters the most. And that's what we gotta do, because that youth is what's gonna be the ones to liberate us. You know, we gotta hear from them. So as we give it to them, and we give this, they use these tools to build with, this is our future right here. I mean, it's the biggest investment you can make. Science Institute. You gotta invest. And there's African Senate institutes all over the country. You gotta find where they at. You gotta support those people, because there's people out here that actually have institutions and that are actually in the community doing things. You know, it's not about what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it. You have people doing it. So it's happening. You just gotta get with the brothers, help the brothers, support the future, support yourself. That's what we're doing. You know?